Good afternoon. How are you? I'm walking a trail along the Potomac because I thought some of the colors might be out here. And there's some magnificent views. It's sometimes crowded, whereas where I normally walk, the dirt road gangs walk, there's usually not anybody there. Just myself and you guys, virtually. Trying to grasp the unpleasant, repressive government that grows daily, to borrow from John Dean, like a cancer, is upsetting, prompts imbalance, discourages people from fighting, is intended to discourage us from believing anything we say can make a difference. And the First Amendment was created so that governments could be pushed back by the people when they did wrong or were misguided or didn't get the sense of what the people wanted. In my lifetime, I believe, I've seen it work. And the question is, will it work this time? And you might say, how could it possibly have worked? Well, first of all, it's not fast, it's gradual, and it requires accretions of belief from the people that they have to do something and that nothing short of action will work. So those of us who observed the Vietnam War saw the war go on for a while until servicemen and women came back and told us what was going on. So it was the information that informed the discretion of the public that something wasn't quite right. We kept, that is, our government kept telling us things were fine until the Pentagon Papers were released, I suppose. And so it grew day by day that what we were doing there was being withheld from the people, and that we couldn't trust them, and still Republicans and Democrats persisted. McNamara wrote a book confessing to his lies afterwards, and I once stood in a bookstore for a while, fast reading, Evelyn Wood style, the book, because I didn't want to pay for it. I didn't want him to have a dime for his lies. Now, if you go from that to Watergate, dirty tricks, to Ronald Reagan and the elder Bush in the Contra War, that was another set of lies and so forth. If you go to little Bush with his weapons of mass destruction that didn't exist, and now we have Trump. Is he the worst of the bunch? He may be, because he's managed to do what the country has not suffered since perhaps two other events. One was at the very early stage of our country, when John Adams was the champion of the Federalists, and he took very many of the positions about the force of government and a kind of monarchical bent, as does Trump, citing statutes and policies that made him a one-term president, and I think was the downfall of the First Federalist Party, because during Jefferson's term of office, they were basically annihilated politically. The next one, of course, is the Civil War. I'm not saying there weren't other things. We've had periods of ruin, if you will, in a corrupt sense, in an ethical sense, when we had members of Congress openly saying what they would cost to turn themselves over. But the modern presidency has gotten stronger and stronger, and it sort of pivoted about the time that Teddy Roosevelt became president, when McKinley was shot dead. Not immediately, but he died. And that's how TR became president. A fella by the name of Woodrow Wilson was a historian, and he wrote a book about how, since the Congress was weak, perhaps we needed a parliamentary government. But he then thought that book was really not very current, given how TR had seized the power of the government. Now, I'm not going to blame TR for what's happening now, but the presidency got stronger and stronger, ironically, when Republicans were in control, espousing the theory that they should leave it to local governments. When turn by turn, when exposed to power, they strengthened the power of the presidency. And now we're in the extreme case. So today, for example, there's a press conference, and a question is being put to him by ABC. And Trump stops the reporter who's asking the question and said, no, you're with ABC. I'm not going to talk to you because of what George Stephanopoulos did with the vice president and the way he asked him questions. Now, Stephanopoulos asked him questions about the $50,000 paid to a member of the regime, if you will, and what happened with it. Did he keep it? So on and so forth. And unconvincingly and transparently false was the vice president's answers instead of directly answering the question. It was good journalism. It was done with dignity. There wasn't any name calling, none of the kind of Fox motif that we normally see. Now, we also have our Secretary of Defense, who wants to be called the Secretary of War, who is doing similar things, muzzling the press. So they walked up and left. And people say, what are we going to do now? I think we're going to have some old style reporting. The best of our press and media will develop sources and then release stories. And then a lot of what this administration does wrong is visible, like killing people and open international waters without any evidence that they're drug runners, and some evidence that people have been attacked who were not. One released in Colombia recently. We also have the occupation of cities by the government. And the occupation is, if you measure it in terms of military strength, is symbolic, but seems to be working. And the theory of police actions is, if I beat up one person, 100 will not want that to happen to them, and so they'll toe the line, so to speak. Now, so we're seeing that developing and trying to get people to cower. And one of the answers has been to dress in such a fashion as to limit the demonstration to a statement against the government. We also have courts that are working our way. Lower courts usually, even Trump appointees actually. But when we get into the mid-level courts and the Supreme Court, we're obviously fighting City Hall and trying to make a difference. Now, in the last couple of days, we've seen a president really destroy a third of what is considered the White House, destroying history, thumb in your eye kind of thing. It gives new meaning to past demonstrations in which people destroy things in the street, destroy stores. Here, destroying public building without any input from anyone to either declare that we should tear down this building. And again, it's both substantive and symbolic. It's like a child testing a parent. How far can I get away with this? And seemingly nobody pushes back. No censure, no impeachment. I guess they're sitting on Congressman Green. No court cases from the Congress, basically. You have to turn to the ACLU. You have to turn to state attorneys general. You have to look to other people. But there's fight there, and then there's the demonstration of the people. So the elements that have existed in earlier compromised presidencies exist to right this wrong, to reestablish order and law, to respect the Constitution. But the suspense is when, particularly if we're doing less, and will it be at all if we're doing less, and what will it look like if we don't do what we should be doing? Fighting at every way, at every level. And we got a hint of that in the last several days, because there's now talk of how Trump, he could run again in 28. He could be president. And the media, instead of tearing it apart, are offering scenarios by which it could work. It's like embrace the sword as it's coming toward your chest and push it into yourself. It's a kind of political suicide that we have going on. Land of the free, home of the brave. Well, if we're not very brave, we won't be very free. The train's leaving the station. Brunswick is a town near where I'm walking, and it's a train station as well, noted for it. And if you walk the streets there, you can see how some of the old technology affected who lived where. So there are hills that are quite steep in which people would work on the railroad and live in poor housing, right up to more important housing for the more important members of the railroad in those times. The canal was also a means of communicating and helping commerce move from one place to the other. Train, canal, the Potomac River, so you get that idea. So that's what that sound symbolizes to me. So how do we deal with this? Well, one thing you have to do is to protect yourself from the depression of the collision of the values that we have taught and believed for so long and had to question under difficult times and decided to stand by those, versus basically the street gang approach to our government. And that's more polite than saying it's like a dictator in any one of a number of countries. We have seen that Trump leans into what's wrong and outrageous. And one of us who participate in this walk and talk and messages back and forth said that, Trump figures he's going to die and wants to take as many things as he can with him. And that's not an outrageous view. We are going to take years to recover from what's happened here with Trump. But that presumes an outcome in which Trump stops. He's not elected in 28, and hopefully he's not in office the period of time between now and 28. And I'm talking about legitimate exercises. The man basically committed a major crime, and my laugh is hysteria, by tearing down a whole building. And he rushed to do it. There were conversations in which he said, we got to do this before they try to stop us. And we can do this, that, and the other thing with the money. This man has not even been an honest businessman. And we have the cases and the convictions and the awards to show it. And we see how he's transformed our so-called justice system, which was not perfect, indeed flawed, but he took it to a whole new level of a personal police force, brown shirts and FBI clothing. And hell, if you show any inclination to be virtuous, to follow the ethical steps one should follow in a public office, the laws one should follow, the Constitution one should follow, then you see how dramatic is the break between what this government is and is doing and what needs to be done. So how do we go forward? Some of us write every day to representatives. I'm not one of them. I say that because I just remember messages today. A bunch of people were telling me how they're writing to the members of Congress, of the Senate and the House. And so that's one thing individuals do, coming to these rallies, showing force. In a few weeks, we're going to have 2 elections. One's going to be New York, mayor, and the other's going to be 3 candidates up statewide to be elected or not to run the government. Right now, it looks like the Republican incumbent is going to be replaced by a Democratic former CIA person who has had a lot of experience fighting crime and so forth. These are tells, if you will. These will tell us what we have from the people, what they think, how they think we should go forward. And I expect we're going to see something like we saw at the rallies. But we also need the people out there speaking who were elected by large segments of our society, elected by the people to be in the Senate or the House or in the state governments. And that's not happening right now. What we have is cowards in the Republican Party, cowards in the Democratic Party, perhaps for different reasons, but with the same effect. It is so hard to watch Johnson on a day-to-day basis. How is he not embarrassed and humiliated to give the bullshit explanations he does of why the government should remain closed? And don't worry, these people aren't going to die because they don't have health coverage. Yes, they will. They absolutely will. These kids are not going to be starving because they can't get food under SNAPs. Yes, they will. And it goes on and on. These people who work for the government and are not being paid. What's that about? So Trump seems, if you go through the catalog of things I've just mentioned and the others that you know that are related, that are him, it's like he's hell-bent on destroying America in every way possible, making us vulnerable in every way possible, whether it be business or law, whether it be home life, whether it be disease, you just name it. And there's a sickness in that suggests either evil, perhaps combined with a kind of broken personal health that doesn't allow you to see or know or have the cognitive facility to be what other humans usually are, which is empathetic and concerned about what's going on, proud of good accomplishments, not evil ones. But this guy's as twisted as a mobster from days of yore, and more dangerous because of all the power he can wield in the position that he now holds. So, these are a couple of thoughts I had walking by the canal. I also thought a change of place might allow some of this to escape my mind and float in the air so that you could hear what I think is going on. I doubt that you differ much from me. I mean, the people who normally participate in these things in which we walk and talk about what's going on. So that's what I have for today, and I may take a couple of good pictures. Those of you who follow me also on other social media can take a look and see it, Facebook, X, things like that. So for now, I say goodbye to you from our trail by the waters. All the best. Bye-bye.